Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hey, it's 5:15. Welcome to the Erudition Network. My name is Eddie Phillips. Actually, it's 5:17. Welcome to the Erudition Network. And my name is Eddie Phillips, and this is the Thursday Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. Hey, we're going to be on here to just about 6 o'clock our time. You know, we started a little bit late, so we'll cut it a little short. I have another show I need to go on later on tonight. But I am here, as I always am, for us to share Black history and to go over Black history studies and things that we don't typically cover. We don't have a lot of people in here right now. Matter of fact, I see we have 0 people in here right now. So I'm going to give a couple of moments for people to sort of start to connect, to come in. Start a little bit late. But I want to get into this. I asked a couple of people this afternoon if they wanted to come on to the show. I just put it out there generally. I think I got a couple of people who said that they may desire to come on and drop in, and I would appreciate it because I didn't want to spend this tonight just me talking. We did a great job last week of talking about Dr. King. We're doing Dr. King's going into Dr. King's birthday and going over the fundamental things that Dr. King truly believed in and his principles. I thought that was a great discussion. I got a lot of positive feedback from that discussion, and those of you who hadn't seen those principles before, and I was impressed with. I'm sorry, I'm a little choky. With my sons this week because on Wednesday they had a similar PowerPoint and presentation, and they sat down and they talked about prison systems and the differences between America and other countries, particularly the UK. And it was a very, very, very intriguing program, and I greatly enjoyed what they did. My son said it's because he watched the program that I did last week on Thursday, talking about Dr. King's principles, of education, personal commitment, negotiation, direct action, and reconciliation. Those things and how they work, not only as a civil rights tool, but also as something for us to know as we move forward, and how we live our lives with some form of integrity. It's a little hot in here, so I'm gonna my sleeves down a little bit. We've had to turn the heat on. As many of you have been around the country, you've been under the frost and the cold and the freeze of some people 50 minus 50 and different things like that. And we have too. So we cut our heat up here so as to not blow out any pipes. Good idea. Don't mess your pipes up. But I really wanted us here tonight. I'm gonna see if anybody was coming on, because as I said, regardless of the fact, I'm going to be out of here a little bit earlier tonight. So I want to make sure we get people who wanted to come on. I'm trying to reach out to one of them right now to see if he was serious. And if he's not, we'll still go through our broadcast and talk about things that we need to talk about. There's enough history for us to talk about. drop a link to these individuals so that they know that, you know, I'm open for them to come on. You know, these broadcasts, I'm seeing so many podcasts um going out and coming out, and different individuals um sharing things that they believe are important, and we all have the right to do that. Um, but you know, one of the things that I've been very interested in is people um, doing positive things, right? I'm a big advocate of that. I think that positivity um, is key. Sorry, you all sending these things out. All right. Well, I sent out invitations to folks who may have said that they may have thought about coming on and joining us tonight. If not, so here's the thing: for the last few 2 weeks now, I've been working on a book. Yes, me, a book. Um, I have been working on a book that we're getting prepared to release as an as an ebook, and in an interactive history book that can be used on your phone, your laptops, your tablets, and allow you to delve into our history. Um, One of the things I wanted to do with this book is I really wanted us um, to grow in our knowledge. So much of what we have been told out here um, is slave based, right? It's heavily slave based, and I wanted I want us to start getting out of that, getting out of the thought of that. Um, because see, if we start our history as simply um, something that is based on slavery, it's not the truth. It's not factual, and it gives our children. You know, I see so many of these politicians out here right now talking about how they believe that the sharing some of these things hurts kids' feelings. It makes them feel bad about themselves. And one of the things that sits in my crowd is that they don't have a problem and our children having um, these deficits or these problems or feeling that they've been slighted um, in the way that we share history. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure we start to talk about history and its truth and its fullness. And so that's what we've done. Here's the book that we're getting ready to come out with. It's 101 Black History Question Challenge, and it truly is a challenge because what it's going to do, what it's going to provide, is a a way of looking at our history, and I'm going to ask questions that you can interact with that are questions that I know many of us are questions about things I know many of us don't know. And then you can go in, you can use this book as a game. You can use this book um as a self-learning tool. Um you can do 20 questions with your family from different sections of the book. You can say, hey, let's do Carthaginians, right? And what they did and who they were. Um, and you can go through different points. What happened in Mesopotamia, right? You could talk about the Elam, the Saba, the Indus Valley people. Um, there will be questions in there that can be asked, and they're not necessarily hard, but they're not necessarily easy. And then the ability for you to grow your knowledge and to go look at those questions, look those things up, and learn from it. Right? Talk about the origins of humanity. Right? Questions that ask you how this started. Right? Who were the early cultures? And what are some of the things that they faced in Africa? So all of this that we're doing, that are the things that are coming up, are designed to make you want to learn. Well, I don't know if we got anybody coming, so I'm gonna start this for the next 30 or 40 minutes. What we're gonna talk about is the need for this, the need for Black history, the need for us to learn who we are, why, how did we get here? Um, I I can tell you from study, from reading, there is a very big need for Black history. People get mad that we name it Black history, though. They say, well, why can't it just be regular history? But wait a minute. It could have been regular history. But the problem is that in the grand scheme of history, we have lied so much. We have told mistruths so much for not hundreds, but thousands of years now. Things have been hidden. Things have been taken away. And though ancient historians had thoughts, we're now only coming to understand how much has been hidden from us. Not what has been hidden, but how much. Right? And so, what I want us to start to do is to start to understand that nobody's trying to make you feel less than. No one's trying to make you feel that you're less than because you don't know these things. But what we want you to do is we want you to start to understand how important, right, it is to know these facts. It is to delve into these issues. We know so many different things about people who live thousands and hundreds of years ago. We know these things because they're taught to us in school. But we're not given the full facts. And that's not just me making that statement without any validation. That's me telling you that that's the truth. We don't know who we are. And it has become oppressively important that we do know who we are. Because we have not valued it, people are now taking it away from us. They're now telling us we don't have the right to that information. Governments are banning it. That's where we are. So I want us to start to understand the importance, because if we start to understand the importance, maybe we'll start to tune in to programs like this. Maybe we'll start to share information with our families, with our friends, in our churches. It's always so hard to get people to join in to these kinds of conversations. Um, I was telling someone recently, I said, it's easier for me to get a singer or someone or a rapper or a performer. Not saying anything bad about any of those people, than to get a historian on to talk to you about something that you don't know that could actually benefit your life. And a lot of people tune it out. They don't watch it, they don't listen to it. The reason why we have this book coming out is because I really want you to identify, not fully, just a little bit. It's 101 questions. And I want you to identify how much you don't know before you run out here and buy your next 1619 shirt, before you go out here and buy your I'm Not My Ancestor shirt, before you go out here and do any of those things. I want you to know, to see how much has been hidden from you. Some of you say, well, I got a high school diploma. I got a bachelor's degree. I got a master's degree. Some folks say I got a doctorate in history, but they can't tell you anything in depthly about Black history. I have sat with PhDs and people and they go, wow, I didn't know that. They can't tell you what Herodotus wrote about the Africans. They can't tell you what Xenophon wrote about people, what Polybius wrote. They can't tell you what Diodorus Siculus wrote, right? These are major historians, Tacitus. They can't tell you this because a lot of it has been hidden. It has been hidden. And so what we tried to do in this book is to touch on those things, to touch on them so that I'm sorry about the bill, so that you understand just how much it is and how important it is for you to peer back through time and see these things. Take this down. I have been blessed and benefited with the ability to have a desire, I guess. I should just say it's a desire to want to learn these things, to want to delve deeper into them, and to try to figure out um, how they benefit us, how they play into our actual um, daily lives. And it's a blessing. But I've started to realize it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. And everybody can't be held accountable for it. Because a lot of people um, they turn away from it until you try to break it down to them of why it's so important, why it's needed. In our schools, I watched today that it came out that I believe it's in Florida, that again there's new um, restrictions, takes funds away from diversity, right? Because again, um, people don't want, they call it woke. They call it whatever they want to call it. But the Florida Department of Education decided that it wanted to take taxpayer funds. That means people who, you and others who pay into the taxes, it can't be used to promote, as they say, pervert it. But there's no perversion. They don't want it to promote diversity, equality, or inclusion. They want to ban those programs. And they're trying to stop it at 28 state colleges and campuses. They're trying to stop how you teach about the sociology and how cultures developed, because they see it as a negative thing to the Americas. People don't want you to ask, as we often say on here, empirical questions. They don't want you to ask who, what, when, where, and why. They don't want that. And when you get on to talk about these things, it's often so hard to coax people to talk about it. I have asked people on many occasions to come on Erudition on this History Interactive. People ask me, they say, Eddie, why don't you have more historians and more teachers? And I know a lot of teachers and I know historians. But what I have found is that a lot of them won't come on. And when we talk about history, they tell me what they know of history that they've learned in school. And when I start to ask questions outside of those references, I almost feel as if it becomes embarrassing. They don't want to show that they don't know that. But it's not that it's embarrassing. It's the fact we don't discuss it. We don't discuss the origin of humanity. We don't discuss who the ancient Egyptians were and the different cultures and kingdoms of Egypt. We don't talk about how Blacks interacted with the Asian continent. If I asked you about the people of the Elam or the Saba, most of us don't know. If I ask you about the people of Numidia, you don't know. But if I ask you, when did the first slave arrive here in the Americas? 8 out of 10 people are going to tell me 1619. If I ask you who was the first president of the United States, I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 are going to say George Washington. And even if they don't say George Washington, they're going to say somebody like Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln, because they have enough of a residual memory to at least remember that they were presidents. We have African blood in us, all of us. But no one talks about the great kingdoms of Kush, Axum. We don't talk about the Swahili Confederation. We don't even think to talk about how the different life came out of Africa and went east. And why did they go east? To some, we're not even interested in it, because we ask, well, how does that fit with me today? Why is that important to me today? Tina, good to see you. Pastor Gibson, good to see you. Why should I care? Right? Why should I care about any of those things? And that's a problem. Because while we're saying that those things aren't so important, we negate the fact, right? We negate the fact of what they did for history. I asked a question the other day, and I asked this question because I knew the truth, but I wanted to see what people would say, what they would think, right? And I think I actually asked a couple of questions the other day on Facebook, but one of the questions that I know that I asked was about water systems. And you say to yourself, well, why is that important? Right? Who cares? But if we know who built the aqueducts, right, and where that knowledge came from, then we know how man learned to live and how to sculpt the environment to his needs. Now, I had people tell me all types of things. Folks told me that happened in Mesopotamia. One person talked about the Minoans in Crete, and these cultures did do that. But what I wanted people to understand is that while we gave all of the credit of the aqueducts, because if you were to go and do a general search right now, go Google aqueducts right now, the first thing you're going to see that's going to pop up are the Romans. If you delve a little deeper, then you're going to see the Greeks. But no one's going to talk to you about the water systems in ancient Egypt that were used to pull water out of the Nile to support the cities. No one's going to talk to you about the sewer and water systems that were used in Ur. And no one's going to talk to you about the amazing sewer and water systems of the people of the Indus Valley, who built dams, who use water and sloops with systems in order to get the water from the mountains around them into the city and to dam it so that they could be able to use it as fresh water when they needed it. That's not taught to us because that technology, that understanding comes out of a people who look like us. And then that becomes a problem. That becomes a problem because we don't understand our value and what we're able to bring to the table, what our people, our culture, folks who look just like me and you. And folks say, well, why does that matter? Why is that? Why does Black history matter? Why do we call it Black history? Why do we care? But you forget when you were a kid, second, third grade, and you picked up your first history book, and they talked about early man, and they showed you the Australopithecus, right? They showed you Cheddar Man. They showed you all of these different things. They talked to you about Darwinism a little bit. And then they talked about how cultures modernize. And then they went to Europe and they talked to you about the Renaissance. They talked to you about the kings and queens of England. They talked to you about the people in France. They talked to you about the Germans. They talked to you about everybody except the African, the early African history. And when they got to the African, when they finally got to somebody who looked like you, You saw them in chains. You saw pictures of them being beat. Pictures of someone holding their finger down, screaming at them. And you had to connect as a young Black child, learning history. You saw history as oppression. Rather, it was subconscious, but it was there. You saw history as something to oppress you. And that is a problem. And that is why we do what we do on shows like this. That is why I take my time to do this. Because I remember being a young African American child and seeing those pictures. I remember how after they talked about us being slaves, they talked about the great white man who helped to create America. They talked about the Teddy Roosevelts, the Franklin Delano Roosevelts. They talked about the Rockefellers. They talked about everybody except us. Except us. I want you to think differently. I want you to see it differently. And in order for us to do that, right, we got to start teaching. So when you see I'm going to tell you that that are out here, those who are out here, the 3 or 4 of you who are on here right now, I'm going to tell you that this book, this question book that I'm doing, it takes a lot to do it. I was so angry the other day because I sat there looking at this. This is the new book, going through this information and remembering things and saying to myself, see, this is why. This is why. And having to be reminded over and over and over again that's why this is an important thing to do. Because there's so many lies out here. Mike, if you're on here, man, I don't see you. Perhaps they weren't educated enough to understand what they could teach us about our history or culture. No, that's not necessarily true, Tina, because as I just said earlier, for thousands of years, right? Whether you're talking about Herodotus, Xenophon, Polybius, whether you're talking about Sallust, whether you're talking about Flavius Josephus, who wrote a lot of the history of what happened with the people of Israel, whether you're talking about Sima Qian, who wrote a lot about Asian history and its inflection with African history. Rather, you're talking about Diodorus Siculus, right, who wrote the Bibliotheca Historica, right, and wrote 40 books talking about Africans, Ethiopians, and how we influenced the world. People don't go pull up ancient texts, and that's not for everybody to do. But what we should be doing, right, is teaching. Is teaching what we've read, teaching what we've learned. When people give all of the knowledge and historical value to the people of Greece and to the Romans, and they ignore the information that came up from Nubia through the kingdoms of Cush, through Uxum, and up through Egypt, then we have a problem. We have an amazingly huge problem. Because now we don't know. And many of us aren't going to go back to transcribe. You know, we had a conversation the other day about the Library of Alexandria. And everybody talks about the burning of the library. And many and some historians talk about, well, that's what really launched us into the Dark Ages. And my point was, well, what about all of the other learning institutes that had been developed in Africa? What about Timbuktu? What about all the great Muslim training places that these same texts were stored in? What about the multitude of trading towns and places, some mentioned in the Bible, that people went to? Knowledge never, ever sits in one place. But that's the lie that we've been told. That's the lie that we've been told. However, even in the midst of all of the lies and the half-truths, God will not be mocked. In 1987, when they were able to go in and trace DNA, when they were able to go in and look at the Y chromosome DNA from man, right? And the maternal DNA, the Eve and the Adam DNA, they were able to go in there and break that code and see, wait a minute, this has African. I'm able to trace it all the way back to that mitochondrial Eve. I'm able to say she came from Africa. Everybody wasn't happy about that because that destroyed a whole millennia of lies. That destroyed the ability to say, well, no, we found bones and hills here in Newfoundland. Well, that's great, but they don't date as far back as evidence that we have right now genetically. The genome stopped agreeing with Darwin. It stopped allowing us to see evolution as something that was just simply, yeah, man evolves. Well, man can evolve, and he has, but man can also devolve. And that also was proven. The need for Black history has never been more great. It has never been more great. And yet, week after week, day after day, many of us don't know. And we listen to half-truths, passed down sophistry, passed down hyperbole, no fact-finding, no validation, no facts, no truth. Just sounds good. It makes me feel a certain way. But it ain't real. We have spent great amounts of time on this program talking to you about so many things. So many things that still relate today. I had a conversation online about a year or so ago with someone about climate change. And the guy was telling me, well, climate change is cyclical. It's not really a thing. It's not really important. And what he failed to understand was that climate change is extremely important. It is climate change more than anything else that shaped early man's migration out of Africa. More than anything. I did a whole deep dive into solar insolation, talking to you about the weeble wobble of the earth. The weeble wobble is a non-scientific term, right? But the earth shifts. It shifts because of celestial things that happen, right? It shifts because of something called perturbations. And I told you what that was. The pull and tug that the planets have on each other as they orbit. But somewhere in the weeble wobble, in the math that is associated, the earth changed a little bit. And one of the largest continents on the planet that was the origin of life, Africa, had a change in its climate. And in order for people to survive, they migrated. They went to where it was less hot. They went to where there was more lush lands. They went east. They went north. Some people went further south. And as they made their way through these migration patterns, the world was shaped. That's how important climate change is. That's why we should know the history of it. That's why it's so important to where we are right now. So even if I entertain the idea that it's cyclical and it'll happen every now and again because of the way that the planets move, it's definitely not something to blow off. As many of you are sitting in deep freezes throughout the country right now. As storm systems become worse than they've been in over 100 years. And we lie to ourselves as if these things don't have any importance. But ancient history shows us they are highly important. And it makes a crucial role in who survives and how man moves. Studying our history helps us to recognize what our ancestors went through, helps us to avoid traps, helps us to understand and learn something faster. People know their entire lineage as far back as they can trace, and it gives them a sense of pride because I know where I come from. You can't tell me who I am or where I've been. I wanted to get people on here tonight so we could talk about the importance of history and why it's so important. But that's okay. We all have busy schedules and I know how that works. But I I want you to know that it is highly important, and it is one of the reasons why we do what we do on here. Later on tonight, I will probably share it with the Erudition Network. I will get off of this show, and I'm going to go on our show tonight to do another program for someone. Came up at the last minute, but I appreciate the invite, and I think that that's something that we're definitely going to talk about. We are in a problem, and we need us all. Need us all to do better. We have whole states voting on whether people should learn about other cultures. We have whole states trying to ban the idea of people having an understanding of what we have allowed them to term as race, sex, color, gender, and national origin. These things that are supposedly protected by our country's constitution. And there are folks who don't want you to know truths about this country, truths about this world, outside of slavery. And I don't mean the emancipation of slavery, from slavery. I mean, they want you to know they're not fighting against the Confederate flag. They're not fighting against Confederate reenactment. They're not challenging that and saying that that's woke. No, they don't want you to know your history. They want you to accept the Western Orthodox idea of history. The very Western Orthodox idea of history that is being taught to our kids in school every day. That Western Orthodox approach is killing us. It's killing us. Because as we keep teaching it, as we keep teaching supremacy, we move more and more away from reality and fact. When you learn something in history now, more than often, 80% of the time, it is presented to you. Go on Amazon and look right now. And you will find that is presented to you by a white historian from all over the world who somehow, some way figures out that Africans did this. Africans discovered that. Black Americans discovered this. Our own ancestor stories are being retold to us by the ancestors of people who tried to keep the information away from us. And a lot of times, you can't trust the information that you're getting because it's pseudo history. It is the reason that I have spent the last couple of weeks sitting here going over this book. And I convinced myself initially, Eddie, it's a question book. It's just 101 questions. But there are 101 questions that I guarantee you, many of you never thought to ask, and you definitely weren't taught to consider. Because we are constantly taught the same formatted history with the same conclusion. But I keep telling people, and I wrote it in the beginning of this upcoming book, I want you to put yourself in the place of that second and third grade child, first getting their first history book. And the first time you see anybody that looks like you, they're being waylaid, chained down. What does that do to your psyche? What does that tell you about you? How does that inform your psychology? And when many of us say, well, I hated history class, it was boring. I didn't want to be there. You've already created an unconscious disconnect because it wasn't about me. It was never about me. They didn't teach me about anything that looked like me. History books aren't written to describe that the migration and the origins of humanity came out of Africa. They talk to you about the Bering Strait and the people coming over from Asia. I'm not making that up. I can pull history books from right over here off my desk right now, which will show you the exact same thing. And when you discuss everything else, yeah, I understand, Tina, people have been busy. The first thing comes out of people's mouths, excuse me, is, well, that's radical. That's racist. I had someone tell me when I first started Erudition, they said, aren't you worried that people are going to think that you're being racist? I said, because I'm teaching Black history? If the idea of teaching Black history is racist, then I have to assume that on the other end of them teaching history to our kids the way that they do, that's racist. Now, if you're not going to say that that's racist, then how can you say me teaching our kids about the great Zimbabwe, about Timbuktu, about the Haitian Revolution, about the people of Ghana, the people of Mali, the people of the Songhai? How can that ever be racist? If we don't know these cultures, then we can believe whatever they tell us. When they tell us that the transatlantic enslavement of people and transfer of people were done by our own people, but they don't tell you how the Portuguese married into these cultures. They don't tell you about how the European went in and married into these cultures, or how they had bastard children who went into these cultures as tribe members who shared the same skin color, but were being utilized and used by their European fathers. It is easy for us to misunderstand history when it hasn't been shared to us. Denzel Washington is up right now to play Hannibal Barca, and people got very angry, pissed. I'll use that term. Sorry if it offends some of the Christians out there. Pissed. How dare them say that Hannibal Barca was Black? How dare them say that? When by historical fact, we know that Hannibal had Black in him. By historical evidence. But it's easy for us to be lied to, because how many of you have ever picked up a book, a history book, in your kindergarten through 12th grade and ever read about the Carthaginians or the Numidians? How many of you have actually picked up a book and been able to read that? What do you know about the wars that were waged with the Romans and why those wars were waged? What do you know about the Numidians? What do you know about the things and the reason why the Carthaginian Empire fell? You don't know who you are. But let me tell you something. The generals and the warriors, see somebody on here right now said, no, you learned about Robert E. Lee. More than you ever wanted to know. I agree. More than you ever wanted to know. But guess what? They were learning about Carthaginian arts of war. They were being taught about how Hannibal was able to destroy 6,000 to 9,000 Romans. They learned that. They didn't pass it to you. They didn't tell you about the betrayals of some of these kingdoms that were put into place to take down Carthage. You don't know how the Phoenician Empire, which was a part of Carthage, right? How the Phoenicians played into the building of the Temple of Solomon. How the dyes and different things were used. You don't know about Sheba other than what you read in the Bible. And you don't know how important it was and what they bought to Solomon and where those riches came from. We talk about the frankincense and myrrh in the Bible with Jesus and not understand where these men came from and how important these spices and things were. But because we don't spend the time to learn our history, I hear so many people come tell me, Eddie, that's, you being a little bit radical. It's not radical. And I'm going to tell you all something as we get ready to hit our hour. We have a lot of people out here who are pretending to be historians. They're not giving you facts, and they're not sitting on at night to show you, give you. On this program, I'm constantly telling you what books to go to, where to how to read, how to get it, because I want you to grow your knowledge for yourself beyond just what I say. But I'm not here to be phony with you. History is not always pleasant, but it is always informative. We have to ask those empirical questions. We have to ask the who, what, when, where, and why. Because when you ask those questions, you start to uncover truths that have been hidden to you. You stop accepting what someone told you, and you start to peer and rightfully divide that truth yourself. You start to see, wait a minute, why did they tell me that the Romans created the aqueducts? Why did they tell me that when they know that there were water systems in Mesopotamia and Egypt and in the Indus Valley? Why did they tell me any of these things? Why did they tell me that? Let me say this. I wasn't going to say it. Yesterday, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get out of here tonight. Yesterday, I was going over my book and trying to get these questions. And I went on and I did a Google search on something and it came back really crazy. So I went on one of these AI, new programs that they have. And I asked it the question. I said, why are you lying about the migration of man when you say that all humanity came out of Africa? And I asked it a question about migration and different things, and it kept telling me, no, these were a diverse people. I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. How are they diverse people? If you say they're African and they went to this area, how are you saying this? And finally, the AI system said, well, it is confusing. Yes, it is confusing because this is what we have, ladies and gentlemen. We have science now telling us that this is what is. This is the mitochondrial data. This is the Y chromosome data that shows that this is where life started. And then we have millennia of lies, fabrication, false narrative, tampered with artifacts that are also within the spectrum. And the AI doesn't know how to parse that. So it's a conundrum to it going, well, wait a minute, I don't know. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. So if life comes out of Africa and everybody migrated out of Africa, then that by definition means everybody should be African, right? No. Well, how was that a no? It's not my life to break the AI. But it is important for us to understand that as we start looking at this AI scraping, while many of us say that we're doing research, we better understand that there are things have been compromised. And that what you see when you pull up on that Google search that you just take as gospel may not be a fact. I'll leave you with that. Dr. Easy Day, I'm glad you joined us. Good to see you here. I appreciate your interaction. This is an interactive program we do every Thursday. Please share. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do another show later on coming off of here in about another 15 minutes. I'll probably share it on our Facebook page for the Erudition Network on Facebook. If you are interested in watching that program, I will try to share the link for that on there once I get it. As we keep telling you, the Erudition Network, this is what we do every Thursday for the Black History Interactive program. We also do, my wife does her Adroit Living, which deals with the psychology of people and man, how to live a more adroit life. She's on Monday, and my sons are on Wednesday for Erudition Generations, where I have 4 sons at 4 different levels who talk to each one of their peer groups and can give thoughts on each one of their peer groups. They had a great show. I advise you, if you missed it, to go back, pull that show up off of our YouTube channel and watch it. They talked about prisons and the differences between cultures. A very, very good show that they did with a slide to try to talk about these things and give their thoughts as young men who are going to have to deal with these issues. As I share with you all the book tonight that's getting ready to come out, you will know when that book comes out. We're going to put that out. It will be definitely something I want you to get for your family to ask these questions that we talked about tonight, and is a first of a series as we try to delve into early world history before 1619, before slavery, so you have a better idea of who you are, where you come from, and thereby shaping where you go. All right. Well, I'm gonna get out of here. Again, thank you all. Thank you. You all have a great rest of your week, and I will definitely be putting that. If you want to be able to, we put our ticker up here. We look for financial support. If you want to help the Erudition Network, we have a Cash App right here. You can send it in. That's what helps us buy our mics and different things, and helping us as we try to create our courses and books to kind of forego some of the costs that we put in on ourselves. But until next time, you all be blessed. And hey, join Dr. Easy Day. You can join us on Facebook. Look for us on Facebook. Look for the Erudition Network. We have a group and we have a page, and you will definitely get more and more from us other than what we put out on the network, on the channel. Thank you all. I will see you later, and thank you for joining us tonight.